Hello and welcome back to another Revit CADclips series. In this set of tutorials we're going to talk about worksets and work sharing. And these lessons are being presented in Revit Architecture 2012, but really it applies to Architecture, Structure, and MEP, and it actually also applies to the different versions. This really hasn't changed a whole lot since the last 2 or 3 versions of Revit, 2009, 10, 11. There is some display modes that have been added in 2012. We'll talk about that. So really a really good overview for anyone who's going to start using worksets, and it really doesn't matter which version or vertical of Revit you're using. So I've just put a little diagram here to get started with, and I've got some notes as we go down here in our introductory lesson. So worksets at a glance is really, you have a central file that sits on the server. We'll talk about how that gets established. Once that central file is created, you don't edit that file. It sits there by itself, and only administrators are the ones that actually go in and open this file. What you do is you make a local copy. Okay, so worksets allow multiple users on the same system here, or on the same network, to edit and work on the same project. In AutoCAD, we use something called an XREF in AutoCAD, where we can XREF each other's files and kind of virtually work on the same project, but really it's kind of smoke and mirrors. In Revit, we have work sharing and worksets and collaboration, where you truly are all editing the same file. So there's some rules that we have to understand on what exactly it is you're editing. You both cannot be editing the same wall at the same time. You can be editing walls that are touching each other or near each other, but as you edit objects, you check them out into your local file, and no one else can make changes. When you save and relinquish back to the central file, then someone else can edit them. So it's a process of really everyone makes a local copy of their central file. Then from there, you work on your file, you save back to the central file, and you upload the other changes. So as this central file is sitting here at the more or less the mothership here, we are all editing and saving our files back and forth locally. And at the end of the day, you close off your computer and this file stays on your computer. You can make another one the next day if you want, but for the most part, everyone creates an exact identical copy of this central file. Revit knows the difference between a central file and a local file. When it opens up, Revit physically knows the difference between these two files, even though they're both .rvt. So this is an RVT file, and so is this one. So looking at it in Windows Explorer, you can't really tell other than maybe by a naming convention, but Revit knows the difference. So as the project starts to work, everyone works on their local project, and then every 15 or 20 minutes you save back to here. When you save, you can choose to give up the objects that you've been using or borrowing. That's up to you, but you are going to push your changes back to the central file. Then someone over here does the same, save, relinquish, and reload, and they will reload the latest changes. So this is going on constantly as everyone is working. They are saving and uploading all those changes. So what happens is you'll do a save and synchronize, and all of a sudden a bunch of stuff will show up because you've got other people working on the project. Okay, you should try to establish a process, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Spatially, you should have a big, a lot of space. If you try to use worksets on a residential single house project, you're going to be stepping on each other's feet constantly. So physically, you're going to be on top of each other. This really works well if the project physically is spread out a little bit. If the project is really small physically, it gets a little bit tricky with multiple people. So if ideally the project physically takes up some space, so everyone kind of has their own little area that they may work on, or workset we'll talk about. Okay, so we'll show you how to create a central file, how to create local files, and how to save and manage your local file with the central file, and all kinds of tips and tricks. So this is just our opening lesson. We'll come back in our next lesson. We'll go through all some of these wonderful notes in here, and then we'll do some practical on a couple of videos. I've also got a snippet of some information in here about work sharing display modes for 2012, which is a new feature which is down here on our visibility toolbar. So there's our opening lesson. Come on back and we'll talk some more about enabling and using work sets.